There are only 41 theaters on the planet that can screen the Odyssey the way Christopher Nolan actually shot it. And right now, people are paying over $1,000 just to get a seat. Theaters have been adding 2 a.m. and 6 a.m. screenings just so they can squeeze more people into that format. But why? To make the Odyssey, Nolan used the IMAX 70mm camera to capture a much greater amount of visual clarity and allow the film to be shown on much bigger screens. Nolan is just another innovator, going all the way back to the 19th century, in the process to create the ultimate immersive experience for audiences that might bring people together. To understand this inclination, we need to go back to the most controversial composer in history, the operaist Richard Wagner. Writing in the mid-19th century, Wagner believed that to bring audiences fully into his work, he had to combine dance, music, and drama into what he called the Gesamtkunstwerk, the total work of art that could provide for the needs of the people in a way that he thought current opera could not. But Wagner demanded a particular kind of space where he could show this Gesamtkunstwerk. He needed the right opera house to put on such grandiose projects as his 4-part, 12-hour opera cycle, Der Ring des Nibelungen. Thus, with the support of the King of Bavaria, Wagner built his opera house in Bayreuth after his specific specifications. This opera house was to be nothing like others in Europe. The house lights would be off. Only the stage would be lit. The audience was supposed to be quiet rather than chatting through the performance. Their attention was to be solely directed towards what was on stage. The orchestra, meanwhile, would be shoved under the stage so they wouldn't be a distraction. He set up the sightlines such that every seat would have a perfect view. There would be no superfluous decorations on the wall, only bare, unadorned wood to ensure the audience's sole attention was on the drama unfolding on stage. For this reason, people still flocked to Bayreuth to see Wagner's opera staged in the environment that he demanded. Wagner's innovations were imitated, but the grandiosity of his ambitions was not replicated until 100 years later, with completely new technology. In 1967, a group of Canadian engineers were noticing the incredible potential of multi-screen projection at Expo 67, having 12 screens all lined up showing the same thing and creating these incredible visuals. But they wanted to avoid the technical difficulties of having to run these 12 screens at once. So, instead of having 12 different screens, they would have one screen, but much, much bigger. Their projectors would use film stock 10 times the size of traditional film stock, just to show these massive images, and set up a brand new system that would feed in the stock sideways so it could run properly. Because the film has much higher resolution by virtue of being so much bigger than traditional film stock, the seating can bring audiences much closer to the screen, and set up, much like Wagner had designed, to bring the audiences as close and connected to the action as possible. They also experimented with surround sound systems to get a similar kind of clarity for the audio. Early on, this new technology, known as IMAX, was limited to nature documentaries and other short films, because really bulky cameras weren't very suited to dialogue. But after studios had experimented with using IMAX for feature films and getting a strong response from audiences, directors like Christopher Nolan grasped the potential of this technology to use for their action sequences. Nolan used IMAX cameras to shoot large portions of 2008's The Dark Knight, even though he was limited by the fact that he could only shoot 2 minutes at once. The Dark Knight was, of course, a massive hit, and pushed Nolan to keep experimenting with IMAX. In 2017, on his film Dunkirk, he used IMAX cameras to shoot 3/4 of the movie. But Nolan had bigger ambitions. He wanted to shoot an entire movie using exclusively the IMAX 70mm cameras. He worked with IMAX to develop new cameras that were light and quiet enough to finally shoot dialogue, whereas the earlier versions would be too loud and bulky to properly use. Yet Nolan still had to create a specialized sound blimp housing for the cameras and set up mirrors for the actors to be able to look at each other. But through these technological innovations, Nolan, through his exacting specification through crazy immersive art, made the Odyssey. And so far, it looks like audiences have wanted to see it. But why go to all these lengths? It's about uniting the audience through a shared experience, like you would in a real theater. This is why technologies like VR or 3D that work by putting goggles over your head don't have the same effect. You're not connected to other people in the same way because it's through the mediation of these glasses. What Wagner and Nolan understood is that they just needed to find the right rooms to see these stories together in.